Well, thank you all for being here. I think we can have a discussion about an important concept in Buddhism, which you find across Theravada and Mahayana. It's really central to the whole of Buddhist teaching. Now remember that the Buddha was really concerned with human suffering, but not necessarily physical suffering, emotional suffering, spiritual suffering. Why am I here? What's the point of it all? That sort of question as well. So he wanted to get to the root of this suffering. What's it all about? What things, if taken away, or if not there, the suffering would cease, or at least be lessened. So that was his whole life's work, and it couldn't be more important. We human beings want to be happy. We want to live in peace. But we don't seem to be very good at it. If you look at the history of the world, read a large history, and it's just a history of war, really, which is rather sad, isn't it? I mean, what is the matter with us, you might ask? So part of that search of his, when he first embarked away from his home, his family, on the search for what are the roots of suffering. Of course, he practiced extremely hard, much harder than any of us could imagine. So determined was he to get to the bottom of it. And his own suffering must have been great, because I don't see how he could have had this concern with suffering if he was not himself suffering. So it wasn't an academic interest. Let's study suffering. That's one that's not been studied before. Let's do a PhD in that subject. I think it's clear that he must have suffered in his own way, and I would suggest it was spiritual suffering. So he's a very intelligent and obviously educated person. He was a son of a local chieftain. So he would have had the best teachers. He would have known about the Upanishads and the Vedas and all the philosophical, spiritual teaching of the time. And you can see that actually when you read through his teachings, that he has knowledge of that. He doesn't flaunt it, and he doesn't always take issue with it directly. But in a way, his whole teaching is a critique of what we now call the Hindu outlook on the world, with its caste system and its animal sacrifice and all the rest of it. He was a critique of all that. Now, on his search for what is at the root of suffering, one thing that he obviously came across is, well, I need to know if I'm through meditation, what things, if taken away, if they did not exist, would start to undermine suffering. So he has to look into himself to find that. There's no point in asking somebody else. He's suffering himself. So what's the root of that suffering? So he came up with some very general and very important ideas that have been in Buddhism ever since then. And that is basically clinging, craving and clinging and attaching. And attaching to a wrong perception or understanding of oneself and the world and how they relate. So looking into himself, one thing he discovered, pretty obvious, is the apparent existence of his body, my body. And my body gives me pain, and when I'm in pain, I'm not happy. So there's one pretty obvious one. So then he started thinking, well, the more I cling to my body, the more it hurts when things go wrong. And of course, my body is going to get old, it's going to start breaking up, I'm going to suffer, and I'm going to die. Doesn't sound very good, does it? On the other hand, I could try to escape from all of that by keeping my body happy, by a lot of pleasure, a lot of entertainment, a lot of enjoyment, get as much of it as we can, which actually is the principle of our current civilization is based on. Have as much fun as possible. It doesn't matter what the consequences are. Just do it, and you will be happy. It's a delusion. The Buddha says the opposite, and that is, realize that you are attaching to your body. Detach from your body. Say to yourself, you look at your body, the sensations, and look what it's made out of, and let go of body. This results in the resounding statement, I am not my body. But somehow I seem to be related to my body because I take possession of it, I have a conception of it, and that's where the trouble starts. The moment I start detaching from my body through meditation techniques, the lesser the pain gets. Another thing that he discovered when he looked into himself was the importance of feelings, of sensations. That this is what I am. I am my body. I think I am my body. I cling to my body. Therefore, I make myself my body. And I make myself my feelings because that's what I find when I look into myself. And then there are more. There are perceptions, which is recognition of things. Like I recognize myself. If I look into the mirror, I recognize other people. I recognize other things. It seems to be some part of the clinging process is recognizing, or perceiving. And then there is formations, which is a very strange concept for us to translate. Shankara, meaning basically our thoughts. So if you ask me, well, what are you? Well, when I look into myself, I see thoughts coming up and dropping away. Some of those thoughts are painful. Wish I didn't have them. Well, they pop, and then I cling to them, and then I start hurting. So, well, it's got something to do with the root of pain, the root of suffering, hasn't it? And finally, my consciousness itself, or vijnana, my consciousness. When I am asleep, my consciousness is temporarily switched off. When it's switched on again, that's when the whole life process starts, isn't it? And that's when suffering becomes a possibility. When I'm asleep, I don't suffer, unless I'm dreaming. But dreaming is where your body is switched off, but maybe the perception, the consciousness is switched on, which is a strange thing about the way the mind works, but very interesting. Now, he's not trying to send us asleep, but he is trying to move us to a point of detachment from those 5 dimensions, or aggregates, as they were called, of clinging. The 5 things I've mentioned: body, feeling, perception, and then we could translate it as formations, but thoughts, if you like, and consciousness. Now, he's not saying I am made of those things. He's saying that when you look into your body, that is what you'll actually find. That's what you'll actually find in looking for this thing you take to be yourself. He says that when we actually look at the behavior of these 5 dimensions and their intertwining and interdependence, we see clinging arising, that I want this, I don't want that, this is good, this is bad, and I start feeling insecure because it constantly changes. Over a long period of time, it changes through my life, but on a daily basis, even in 10 minutes, 5 minutes, 10 seconds, it seems to change. So he refers here to 5 aggregates of clinging, the 5 aggregates leading to suffering through clinging. Now let's simplify all this. It sounds a bit, well, I don't think it's particularly theoretical as such, because he's telling us this is what he finds when he meditates and looks into himself. He finds his body, he finds his consciousness which unifies everything into some sort of picture. Even it's a good survival picture, but it's not a good happiness picture. So let's simplify it now and think, how do we put this into practice? Right, recently one or two people would tell me that, Geoff, sometimes you describe things in a way that people can't understand, which is pretty sad, really. So let's try and make it simple. Let's take, for example, thoughts and feelings. They both come roughly under this thing called the 5 aggregates. Right. Now, I'm sure you've all had the experience of a thought arising, which is a painful thought. It could be a memory of something which was disappointing in your life. It could be something that happened today. It could be that somebody was abusive towards you. It could be because something you expected to be good turned out to be bad, or it didn't happen at all. Thoughts arise. Why me? Why did this happen? What if I had done this? What if I had done that? This is Shankara. This is the aggregate of thoughts, of formations forming in the mind. Now, some of these can be good, of course. We have good thoughts. Thoughts of being generous, thoughts of being kind, thoughts of helping somebody. But have we got the balance right? And do we know what we're doing? Are we aware of our thoughts, and can we distance ourselves from our thoughts? So when a bad thought arises, can I say to myself, this is just a thought? It's not me, it's just a thought. It is only a thought. Go away. Let go of it. It's me clinging to a thought. It is not something sitting on the floor. It is not hanging from a tree. It's in my own mind. Because it generates and it sticks by my own attaching, clinging to it. So the Buddha is trying to show us how to detach through mindfulness practices. So let's think of this now. You're sitting in a chair with your bark chocolate, and your favourite program is on, Strictly or something like that, and maybe a bad thought comes into your mind. And maybe it's a persistent thought, the ones that cause a lot of pain are the ones that keep coming back and seem to refuse to go away. Now, does it help? Now, this is the question I want you to discuss. First of all, have you had that experience? It could be a thought, or it could be a feeling. A feeling is more to do with, if you like, emotion. It could be emotional feeling, okay? Does it help to think, this is not mine. This is not me. It's just a thought. The word just there is very important. It's just a thought, meaning don't take it seriously. It's not me. Now, some people find this a very powerful way of dealing with my thoughts. Others are still working on it. But this is what I want you to think about, right, in the discussion. The other one that helps, I want you to think about this one as well, is that whatever it is, that whatever arises through these 5 dimensions of my being, it will pass. It's impermanent. After all, life itself ends, so that'll be one end, but you can end it any time yourself. So if you can say to yourself, in your suffering, this too will pass. It's not permanent, unless I cling to it. It too will pass. So there's 2 things to remember here. It's just a thought or just a feeling, and secondly, it will pass. I think we all know that as well, don't we? We see it. We see it in ourselves. I was quite grumpy this morning, and I said to Bev, my wife, I said, that's because I know that if I was feeling grumpy, but I also knew that it would pass. And it has passed. I feel quite happy now. Okay? But in 10 minutes time, I might feel miserable. And who knows? Even I don't know. But what I do know is that it is my mind that's playing with this, bouncing this about. So that's the question I want you to think about. Does this all sound familiar? Does it make sense? Is it workable? Have you done it? Can you do it? Will it make a difference if you say to yourself, this is just a thought or feeling? and whatever it is, it will pass. Definitely, no doubt about it, it will pass.